I'm not seeking sympathy or trying to justify my actions, but I would appreciate any helpful advice you might offer. In a nutshell, I had a short-lived affair and became pregnant by a neighbor shortly after my husband Bill and I got married. This led to the birth of our beloved son, Bill Jr., a little over 24 years ago. My husband Bill was unaware of the affair and always believed that Bill Jr. was his biological child. I, too, thought Bill Jr. was my husband's offspring until around the age of 5, when it became evident to me, based on his physical features, that my husband was not his biological father. Now, let me provide some context for how all of this unfolded and why I made the choices I did many years ago. Both my husband and I grew up in the same town, but in vastly different circumstances. Bill was raised in a typical middle-class neighborhood within a conventional family consisting of his mom, dad, and sisters. On the other hand, I was brought up by my mother and grandmother, and we all resided together in Section 8 housing during my teenage years. My father lived in a town 11 miles away. My mom gave birth to me at 17, married my dad at 18, and divorced him just 7 months later. Both my mother and father struggled with alcohol and pill addiction, both prescription and recreational. My grandmother was also an alcoholic and a heavy smoker. I want to emphasize that I'm sharing this information not for pity, but to provide some context for the poor decisions I made early in my marriage. Following my parents' divorce, I saw my dad only 2-3 times a year, usually on my birthday, at Christmas, and perhaps once or twice in between. I knew he loved me, but he lacked the mental capacity and financial stability to care for me due to his pills addiction. After the divorce, my mom and I moved in with my maternal grandmother, and I continued living with them until I married Bill. Over the next 15 years, we relocated a total of 11 times due to either not paying rent or facing eviction. On several occasions, we moved hastily in the middle of the night, leaving the landlord with months of unpaid rent. Just when I began to feel comfortable in our home and had established friendships, we'd uproot and move to a new place, forcing me to start all over again. It was a stressful experience. Both my mom and grandma also changed jobs frequently, sometimes even multiple times in a single year. They worked various minimum wage jobs until they grew tired of the work or were let go. They both engaged in theft from the companies they worked for and had a history of shoplifting, resulting in multiple petty theft charges over the years. My grandmother became a mother at the age of 16 and never married. Throughout the years, both my mom and grandma had numerous boyfriends, including several one-night stands. Their longest relationships never lasted more than a few months. I want to emphasize that I was never left on my own. They always ensured I had food, clean clothes, and a comfortable bed. However, my upbringing followed a non-traditional path. The environment I grew up in was not conducive to healthy development, and as a result, I found myself falling into the same patterns. During high school, I had 7 boyfriends, one of whom I became pregnant by. Although I wanted to keep the baby, my mom and grandma convinced me to have a termination, just as they had done in their teenage years. It's a decision I still regret to this day. Let me introduce you to the wonderful man who entered my life, Bill. He was truly my knight in shining armor. I met Bill while I was working at an ice cream stand in our town. One day, he walked up to the window and asked for my recommendation. We had a brief conversation, and within just 5 minutes of meeting each other, he had the courage to invite me on a date. I was 17 years old at the time, and Bill was 21. Despite our differences, Bill and I immediately connected. Bill was in the last month of his college studies, about to graduate, while I was in my final month of high school. He was an outstanding student, and despite my challenging background, I maintained a respectable academic record with an AB average. We began our relationship as friends for the first 3 months, and we didn't share our first kiss until my 18th birthday. That night holds a special place in my heart. Bill took me out to dinner on one of those old paddle wheel boats that cruised the river. After our meal, as we stood on the deck admiring the beautiful scenery, he tenderly hugged and kissed me. He expressed his love, and I reciprocated by telling him that I loved him too. Following that magical night, our love story took off like a rocket. Bill graduated and secured a job in the largest city in our state. He didn't want to leave me alone in an unfamiliar place, so he asked me to move in with him. We spent 4 months living together, and then, on a spontaneous impulse, we decided to get married at the Justice of the Peace Office. You might be wondering if Bill was aware of my past, and the answer is yes, he knew everything. Our parents were unaware of our relationship, and when we eventually shared the news, my mom, dad, and grandma were thrilled for us. In contrast, Bill's parents were quite upset. While they were fine with Bill dating me, they strongly opposed our marriage due to my high school reputation and my family's history with pills. Fortunately, Bill's love for me overshadowed these concerns, and we embarked on our married life together. Bill promptly purchased a modest house for us in an emerging, yuppie neighborhood within the city. He received the down payment from his parents and secured a loan with a high interest rate to cover the rest. Making ends meet was a challenge, and our home was sparsely furnished for quite some time. Bill was working long hours to establish his career, leaving me alone in this unfamiliar city. To stay occupied and meet people in the neighborhood, I decided to find a job at a nearby frozen yogurt stand within walking distance from our house. It turned out to be a great way to get out of the house and connect with friendly locals. This is where I had the pleasure of meeting our neighbors, who we'll call Cheryl and Charles. They were in their early 40s, with Charles working as a truck driver and Cheryl as a homemaker. They had 5 children and treated themselves to a visit to the yogurt shop once a week as a special treat. In our neighborhood of yuppies, they were the only family who didn't quite fit that mold, reminding me more of the people I was accustomed to. As we got to know each other, I often spent hours chatting with them on their porch. They were incredibly kind and became my surrogate family, especially since Bill was often tied up with work. Let me be direct about this. One week, while Cheryl was in the hospital for surgery and my husband Bill was away at a work convention, Charles spotted me after my 10-hour shift at the yogurt stand. He suggested grabbing a meal at a local fast food place, and feeling utterly exhausted, accepted his invitation. After our meal, we returned to our street, and I mentioned the leaking shower faucet at home that I couldn't manage to turn off. He offered to help, and he did manage to fix it. Afterward, we sat on the couch and talked. That night, things escalated, and we ended up having a sexual encounter. He left at 2 a.m. to avoid being seen by our neighbors. The following night, he discreetly came over again after midnight and stayed until the morning. After our second encounter, overwhelming guilt consumed me, and we both mutually agreed to end the affair and never speak of it again. When I reflect on those days now, it feels peculiar. I can't explain why I did it. I wasn't attracted to Charles in the slightest. He wasn't good-looking, well-built, or well-dressed. He was short, dressed casually, and wasn't wealthy. I think we connected because he reminded me of my dad. Following this, I wholeheartedly recommitted myself to my husband Bill and sought forgiveness from God for my actions. I made a promise to God that I would spend the rest of my life making amends to my husband, which I have done. When Bill returned from his trip, we resumed our married life just as it was before. However, I became even more attentive and loving than ever before. 6 weeks later, I discovered I was pregnant. I did acknowledge a slight possibility that the child might not be Bill's, but I believed it was highly unlikely because Bill and I had spent nearly every day together, often multiple times a day. The only exceptions were the 3 days he was out of town. My involvement with Charles was limited to those 2 nights, and both times he withdrew before anything happened. I didn't have any further contact with Charles or Cheryl. In fact, I never saw them again, because a week later, they abruptly moved out of their house during the night without saying farewell to anyone in the neighborhood. It turned out that their home was facing foreclosure, but they had kept it a secret from everyone, choosing to move out before being evicted. This unexpected departure surprised all the neighbors. My pregnancy became extremely complicated, and I had to remain bedridden for the final 2 months. My husband took exceptional care of me, deepening my love for him, if that was even possible. At the age of 19, I gave birth to our son, and we named him Bill Jr. Bill was overjoyed and proud. For the initial few years, I believed Bill Jr. was Bill's child, but around the age of 5, it became apparent that he wasn't. While his hair and eye color resembled Bill's, his facial features, physique, and the unusual shape of his head mirrored Charles and his son's. My husband didn't have a close relationship with Charles or Cheryl, so I thought my dreadful secret would remain hidden. Fortunately, at that time, there were no home DNA tests like the ones available today. To complicate matters further, After giving birth to Bill Jr., my doctor informed me that I wouldn't be able to have more children due to complications from my previous termination, which had caused scarring. Upon hearing this, I pleaded with Bill to consider adopting a child, but he responded that he was content with his wife and son and couldn't be happier. I continued to push the idea, believing that adding another child to our family might strengthen our bond, especially if the true paternity of Bill Jr. was ever revealed. Finally, after 5 years, Bill and I went through with the adoption process and welcomed our second son, whom we'll call Stevie. Now we were a joyful family of 4. My sons admired their father, and he held them in the highest regard. Their connection was unbreakable, particularly between Bill and Bill Jr. Bill stood a little over 6 feet 2 inches tall and was in excellent shape, while Bill Jr. barely reached 5 feet 8 inches and had a stocky build like his biological father. This size difference always bothered Bill Jr., as he longed to resemble and be like his dad. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't match Bill's physical, academic, or athletic prowess. However, Bill didn't mind this at all. He consistently reassured Bill Jr. that he was exceptional and encouraged him to forge his own path. He would often say, "Bill, don't strive to be like me. Be your own person and discover something you're passionate about." He consistently built up his self-esteem and told him how unique he was. Eventually, Bill Jr. found his calling in trade school, where he pursued plumbing. He's currently in a well-paying job, earning a good income. He's married and has a newborn son. Bill, my husband, was his best man at the wedding, and he named his son after Bill, making him Bill III. It seems like he has a stronger attachment to his father than to his wife or me. This context makes what unfolded next even more challenging. Bill Jr. and his family live about an hour away, but one day, unexpectedly, he appeared at my doorstep during the day. I sensed that something was amiss, so I invited him in, and we started talking. He calmly revealed that he had been contacted by a man who claimed to be his brother, a revelation that shocked me to my core. The man, along with his siblings, had conducted one of those home DNA tests, which indicated that they had a half-brother. They managed to trace him down through online searches, and upon meeting, they handed him a copy of the test results. To validate the accuracy of this revelation, Bill Jr. decided to take an ancestry test himself, which confirmed the same information. After sharing this shocking news and showing me the test results, he began to cry, questioning how I could keep such a secret from him and his father. In response, I could only apologize, explaining that I had concealed the truth because I didn't want to cause them pain. I was in a state of shock at this point and couldn't cry. My primary concern was comforting my son. After a few minutes of tears, he looked at me with intense anger in his eyes and declared, "You are a wicked person." I countered, asserting that I wasn't evil and that it didn't matter who his biological father was because Bill had been and would always be his father. However, Bill Jr. replied firmly, "Yes, Bill is my father, but effective immediately, you are no longer my mother." With that, he abruptly left, storming out. I gave him a call and he picked up. I pleaded with him to return so we could talk, but he refused. Then I uttered, "We need to inform your dad." In response, he erupted, exclaiming, "Don't you even think about telling my dad anything, you wicked woman? Don't you dare!" I reasoned, saying, "Honey, we have no choice. We can't keep this secret now that you know." He shouted at me, insisting that I stay silent, and abruptly hung up. I attempted to reach out to him via calls and texts, but all he sent back was, "Do not say anything to my father and do not come to my home." It was at that moment that I emotionally broke down. That evening, Bill didn't return home. He simply sent me a text at 7:09 p.m. stating, "I will not be home. I'm spending the night with my son." I knew then that he was aware. I decided not to add any more stress to the situation, so I left them be and spent the entire night crying, unable to sleep a wink. At 6:20 a.m., Bill entered the house and came into the bedroom while I was lying there. He sat on the bed next to me and asked me to confess everything. In less than 10 minutes, I spilled the little there was to tell, emphasizing that it had happened only twice, meant nothing, and occurred over 25 years ago. I just kept repeating my apologies and professing my love for him. He remained emotionless and simply stated, "I will file for divorce and will reside at Bill Jr.'s place until it's finalized." Bill and Bill Jr. had constructed a small attached apartment-like unit at the back of Bill Jr.'s property. I was stunned to hear this, and I momentarily blacked out. I began to cry and plead, but Bill continued packing without uttering a word. I kept crying and pleading, but he simply remarked, "Your tears won't change anything. Our relationship is over." Just like that, no room for discussion. He mentioned that he had already informed his parents, sisters, and our son, Stevie. I couldn't believe it, and learning this only intensified my feelings of despair. Now, I find myself all alone in this spacious house, without a husband or family, as none of them want anything to do with me anymore. My mom, grandma, and father have all passed away, so I have no immediate family left. Additionally, I lack close personal friends to confide in, which is why I've turned to this platform. Given my circumstances, what should I do next? I'm shattered and don't want to go on without my husband and my boys. They mean the world to me, and without them, I feel utterly lost. Please, I need your guidance. I'd like to clarify a few things based on the initial responses I received. First, please don't worry about me harming myself. I have faith and would never contemplate such an act. Second, I've sworn off pills and alcohol for good, given my family history. I made this decision when I started my life with Bill and have no intention of going back on it. Thank you. Update. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who responded. Many of you rightfully criticized me, and I accept it because I know that what I did to my husband and son is exceptionally cruel and likely left lasting psychological scars. I deeply regret that this information came to light, and honestly, I wish he had never found out. I still can't fully comprehend why I made such a terrible mistake. It's not an excuse, but back then I was young and foolish, heavily influenced by my upbringing with my mom and grandma. I now understand that I should have immediately confessed my affair to my husband, especially when it became evident that Bill Jr. wasn't his child. It was purely selfish of me because I didn't want to lose my family. I simply couldn't bring myself to say anything because my husband and son were so happy and loved each other so much. Crying. I needed to get that off my chest right away. So, where do things stand now? My husband and I are living separately and haven't spoken since my last update. He's still residing in Bill Jr.'s garage apartment and has initiated divorce proceedings. I've only exchanged a couple of texts with Bill. Bill Jr. holds strong resentment towards me. I talk to his wife once or twice a week to stay informed about what's happening over there. She mentioned that my husband has forgiven and wants to move on from me. How could he possibly want this? She also shared that Bill Jr. hasn't forgiven me and will never forget what I did. Fortunately, Stevie visited yesterday and we had a constructive conversation. We're back on speaking terms, although he remains somewhat distant. I've sent several heartfelt emails, texts, and voicemail messages to both my husband and Bill Jr., but they haven't responded. As of now, my husband is proceeding with the divorce, and there's really nothing I can do to prevent it. I could make it complicated, but I won't. In fact, if that's what he wants, I'll make it as easy as possible for him to demonstrate how much I love and appreciate him. Before I conclude this update, I'd like to address a recurring question about Charles and Cheryl. Unfortunately, they have both passed away. According to their children, Charles passed away over 16 years ago, while Cheryl passed away just last year. Their children conducted ancestry testing to learn more about their parents' extended families. Although I was genuinely saddened to hear about their deaths, it simplifies matters by removing the biological parent complication from the equation. This should make things somewhat easier for both Bill Jr. and Bill. I hope they are both resting in peace in a better place. And I also hope that Cheryl can one day forgive me for the brief mistake I made with her husband all those years ago when I was 18 years old. The second frequently asked question is whether Charles knew about Bill Jr. The answer is no. As I mentioned in my initial post, they moved away shortly after I found out I was pregnant, and I never had any contact with them afterward. Additionally, remember that I believed Bill Jr. was actually Bill's son until he was around 5 years old. That's all I have for now. Thank you for the numerous responses to my story. Final update. After more than 2 years, I thought I would return here to provide an update on my life story in case anyone is still interested. Since all the lockdowns began, like I'm sure many of you have experienced, I've been spending most of my time online. Let me start by giving you an update on my relationship with Bill. We are now officially divorced, and this happened in December 2017. I tried everything in my power to salvage our marriage, but according to him, the moment he learned about my affair and the true paternity of Bill Jr., he was done. I acknowledge that my actions were truly wrong, but I struggle to comprehend how someone can simply switch off their emotions as he did. One day, he was deeply in love with me, enjoying life, and the next, all that love was gone. I find it difficult to fathom how that's even possible. It didn't matter to Bill that I was only 18 years old when all of this happened, or that it occurred over 25 years ago. To him, it was over between us. His response to the situation shattered me on the inside. He reacted like a robot, displaying no visible emotion, while I had to make a tremendous effort to hold back tears every minute during that period. Regarding Bill, I should mention that he is now engaged to marry a woman he worked with for 13 years. She is 34, and he is now 51. Their relationship began shortly after our divorce was finalized, even though I suspect he may have been involved with her while we were still married. My daughter-in-law insists that this isn't the case and claims they only started dating after our divorce was official. Based on what my daughter-in-law told me, Bill Jr. and Stevie will both serve as the best men at their father's wedding. My daughter-in-law mentioned that my ex-husband's fiancée is a fantastic woman and they have plans to have several children. Apparently, once they're married, she intends to leave her job and become a stay-at-home mom. While this is difficult for me to accept, I genuinely wish them the best. During one of my numerous pleas before our divorce, I suggested to Bill that we could adopt another child or even multiple children. He swiftly dismissed the idea, yet he's now planning to have several children with his new wife? I understand it's a different situation, but it still stings. Although we've been divorced for over 2 years, I would trade places with Bill's wife in a heartbeat. I'm pleased to share that Bill Jr. and I have re-established communication. We started talking about a year ago. However, all of our subsequent interactions have been initiated by me, and he typically responds with brief answers like, yes, no, or I don't know. Stevie does the same, although he occasionally asks me questions. It seems as though my sons view me as a monster and only engage with me when necessary. My daughter-in-law, Bill Jr.'s wife, has been like a guardian angel during my divorce, helping me reconcile with both Bill Jr. and Stevie. She possesses remarkable wisdom for her age and is an exceptional wife and mother. She doesn't sugarcoat things and has spoken some harsh truths to me over the years, but they were all things I needed to hear. She's truly wonderful. I believe that covers everything I wanted to share. I wish I had better news to convey, but life is gradually improving with each passing day. Bill was quite generous to me during the divorce, and I'm currently employed in a data entry position at the university, so financial concerns are not a problem. I'd give up everything I have right now if it meant I could get my marriage back, but I know that's never going to happen. Thank you for taking the time to read my post. Please stay safe and healthy.
All right, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in.
I, 26-year-old female, am currently facing a difficult situation that's hard to express in words, but I hope that sharing my story here might offer some insight. My husband, 26-year-old male, and I have a history that dates back to our senior year of high school. We began dating in high school, and our relationship endured long-distance challenges while attending different colleges. Last year, shortly after graduating, we had a beautiful and meaningful wedding ceremony. Both of our families have strong Christian backgrounds, which has always influenced our values, especially in matters of fidelity. I may not have been a devout Christian, but I always held a strong stance against cheating, sex films, and similar activities. It may seem ironic to say that now, but that's who I used to be. Fast forward to last year, and we made a significant move to a more vibrant city across the country. Our relationship was solid, filled with shared experiences, and even involved adopting a puppy. I was content and had no reason to suspect that anything was wrong. However, things took an unexpected turn after I secured a new job during the spring break. It was a higher-paying position with a more significant role, and I started to notice a shift in myself. My interests began to change, my circle of friends evolved, and I started growing distant from my husband. I have to admit, I was drinking more and socializing with new colleagues, which began to alter our relationship dynamics. During a work trip that my job offered me, I found myself involved in an affair with a man who was on a similar business trip, but he worked for a different company. The affair lasted only 3 days, but it was intense and romantic. When I returned home, I immediately ceased communication with him. However, after a few weeks, temptation got the better of me, and I resumed chatting with him on messaging apps. Our conversations became sexual, and I started sending suggestive pictures. It was during these chats that we both discovered that the other person was also married, and we found it rather amusing. By this point, I found myself deeply immersed in an emotional affair with a married man. This caused significant tension and arguments in our marriage, and I came clean about my affair when my husband confronted me with phone records. I became acutely aware of the gravity of my actions and the pain I had inflicted, but the guilt and shame weighed heavily on me. I felt trapped, and I only mustered the honesty to admit my mistake when I was pushed to my limit. The aftermath has been a roller coaster ride, involving counseling and efforts to repair our relationship. My husband harbors a profound sense of distrust, which is completely understandable. I've made a commitment to earn back his trust and demonstrate my dedication, but the process is undeniably challenging. I can sense that the love we once shared is fading, and I fear we may never fully regain what we once had. I sincerely apologize for the pain I've caused and am wholeheartedly dedicated to making amends. It's a tough journey, as I grapple with my own guilt while attempting to rebuild a bond that once seemed unbreakable. I hope that with time, therapy, and genuine effort, we can find our way back to each other, but I recognize that the road ahead will be arduous. Edit. My husband did have a chance to see my phone and the chats, but since our conversations were exclusively on Snapchat, there wasn't much to see. Fortunately, my husband is willing to give our relationship another chance, and I've completely cut off contact with my affair partner. I'm determined not to squander this opportunity because there might not be another. Edit 2. My husband is unaware of the physical aspect of my affair, and I haven't volunteered that information either. Update. Life has certainly thrown me a curveball since my last post. I couldn't have foreseen the tumultuous ride that awaited me. After confessing my emotional affair and working on rebuilding trust with my husband, it seemed like we were on a positive path. We were both committed to therapy, open communication, and giving our relationship a second chance. However, recent events have left me in shock and questioning the person I thought I knew. My trust and respect have been shattered. Somehow, my husband managed to track down my affair partner on social media and pressured him into confessing to the physical aspect of our affair, threatening to reveal it to his wife. I was utterly surprised when my affair partner alerted me to what my husband had done. I had never imagined he would resort to such tactics to uncover the truth, as I believed he trusted my version of events. I may not have the right to feel this way, but the realization that he contacted this man and essentially coerced a confession from him left me feeling violated. The aftermath of this revelation has been as difficult as one might imagine. My husband's reaction was explosive. He yelled at me, used hurtful words, and expressed an anger I had never seen before. He left the house and hasn't returned for 2 days now. I'm grappling with mixed emotions. On one hand, I understand the pain and suffering I caused him, and I admit that my actions were wrong. On the other hand, I'm struggling to accept the extreme measures he took to uncover the truth. It's a heavy burden to bear, as I question the boundaries and respect within our relationship. I never expected our path to healing would take such a chaotic turn. I had hoped that by admitting my mistakes and working together, we could salvage our relationship. But now, I'm wondering if our relationship can weather this storm that has erupted. I find myself at a crossroads, a far cry from the hopefulness I felt just a few days ago. It's been slightly over a month since the events that unfolded after my previous post. As I mentioned in my last update, my husband left our home in a fit of anger. A few days later, he returned and insisted that I leave instead. He argued that since I had damaged our relationship, I should be the one to go, not him. During our heated exchange, hurtful words were exchanged, and although I had no right to retaliate, I couldn't help myself in the heat of the moment. Consequently, I've left the house and sought refuge at my sister's place. The world I once knew has crumbled around me, and being away from our shared home has been emotionally devastating. To compound matters, my husband wasted no time in sharing our personal issues with friends, family, and acquaintances. The support he received was overwhelming, leaving me feeling like the villain in this story. I've been grappling with a bewildering mix of emotions, oscillating between feeling like a complete outcast and trying to avoid the rumors that have likely spread like wildfire. I've even had anxiety about my workplace getting wind of this drama, adding an extra layer of stress to an already messy situation. To top it off, our first wedding anniversary recently passed. Guess what arrived in the mail? Divorce papers. It seems the universe has a peculiar sense of timing. This news hit me like a freight train, serving as a stark reminder that the life I once envisioned has officially derailed. So here I am, typing away from my sister's couch, surrounded by a cocktail of heartache and a touch of relief that I have a place to stay. I won't sugarcoat it. It's been an excruciating journey. I'm attempting to come to terms with everything, grappling with feelings of remorse, guilt, and a deep sense of emptiness. Life has thrown me a curveball, and I'm simply striving to regain my balance amid this turmoil. Perhaps in the future, I'll discover a path to forgive myself for the tangled situation I ended up in. And who knows, maybe even create something fresh. Right now, I'm taking it one day at a time. Keep me in your thoughts, everyone.